If someone were to ask you what has been the greatest moment of your life, how would you answer? What would you say? What springs to mind? Well, let me give you some suggestions. Perhaps the greatest moment of your life was the moment you were born. Now, you probably can't remember it, but when you sucked in that first lungful of air and the doctor smacked you on the bum and you began a lifetime of adventure. Or maybe your greatest moment was the time you took your first steps and your horizons began to expand as you explored and your mother's blood pressure began to go through the roof. Maybe your greatest moment was when you first read a book and new worlds opened up to you, new characters, new stories, new ideas, new imaginations. Maybe your greatest moment was graduating from high school or graduating from university. Maybe your greatest moment was beginning your first day on your first job, or opening the door on your brand new car. Maybe your greatest moment was when you first fell in love, or when you said those vows on your wedding day, or when your child was born. Maybe your greatest moment was when God became real to you, or when you discovered that He had gifted you in so many amazing ways. You know, as you look back on your life, chances are there's a lot of great moments that you can reflect on. But I want to just suggest to you another moment you should consider as being the greatest moment of your life. And I want to say that the greatest moment of your life is this moment right now. Now, that's not just because you're watching this video, but it is a really, really great video. The greatest moment of your life is this moment because honestly and truly, it's the only moment that we've got. When you think about it, all the past history, we've got some great memories from that, but that's the past. We can't live back there. And the future, well, the future's not here yet. And so it's uncertain. We don't know what those future moments are going to be like. So the reality is that regardless of where you are, who you're with, what you're even doing, this moment could be your greatest moment. And I'll tell you why, because this moment could be your greatest moment because it is the opportunity that you have to connect with God. This is the moment God has gifted to you. Not the past, not the future, but this moment right here, right now. You know, the ancient songwriter records these words in Psalm 116. This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. And you know, that songwriter knew that this moment, this day was all that they had. This was the day God had given them to enjoy. This was their opportunity to live with God. 300 years ago, a French priest by the name of Pierre de Cassan wrote these words. The present moment holds infinite riches beyond your wildest dreams, but you will only enjoy them to the extent of your faith and love. To discover God in the smallest and most ordinary things, as well as in the greatest, is to possess a rare and sublime faith. And I think if we're honest, sometimes we miss those moments. In the hustle and bustle of everyday life, there is places to go, people to see, things to do, work to be done. And as we race around and rush around, often we miss the opportunity that God is inviting us to. He's extending a chance for us to share, to enjoy this moment with Him. I don't think that's deliberate. I don't think we intentionally ignore God, but we just get distracted. We get sidetracked. We delay it until tomorrow. Because often we believe that there are certain criteria or conditions that have to be met for us to really, really connect with God. For those moments and circumstances to truly align so that we can really have great moments with God. And so we say things like, well, when the kids are older and less demanding, or when the pressures at work start to ease off, or when we're retired, or when we've reached spiritual maturity, or when we've got more time, or more energy, or more motivation, that's when our greatest moments will happen. But all of us have the exact same time given to us every day. You might have heard people talk about being time poor. Well, it's complete rubbish. We're all time rich. You know, there's over 1,440 minutes given to us each day, or 168 hours every week, or over 61,000 hours every year. That's a lot. We're time rich. But it really comes down to how we prioritize, how we choose to use our time. Jesus had something to say about priorities. On one occasion, he said this: "Seek first God's kingdom and live righteously." Now, that doesn't mean that you've got to suddenly turn around and become a monk or a nun, and you've got to, every waking hour, you're going to be deep in prayer and in contemplation, and you're going to be sort of walking around with your head in the spiritual clouds. Not at all. It simply means considering God's purposes, His plans, His principles for each and every moment of our lives. It means living in tune with Jesus, walking in His footsteps, being guided by God's Holy Spirit each moment of our lives. So I just want to offer you some really practical suggestions about how you can do this, how you can live each moment with God, how you can walk with Jesus every day. So first up, it starts when we wake up. And I've discovered that there's two types of people in the world. The first group are those who love to get up in the mornings. The second group are those who hate those who love to get up in the mornings. Now, I don't know which group you fall into, but chances are you've got your own rhythms, you've got your own routines for the morning and how it works. But what if one of the very first things you did each and every day was to just acknowledge God's goodness to you? To recognize that you can't get through this day without Him, that you're dependent on His strength and His grace, and to invite Him to be with you, to partner with you through each and every step you take. Now, you could get really kind of metaphorical here and, when you're having your morning shower, view this as a good opportunity to kind of cleanse away and wash away any of those impurities or things that are going to kind of hold you back, the wrong intentions, the misguided motivations, anything that's not healthy or wholesome. And, before you kind of get all weird like what's going on in the shower here, this practice of cleansing physically, representing symbolically what happens to us spiritually, has got some ancient roots. The Jewish people had a whole system of physical washing to represent the spiritual washing which we needed to go through before they could approach God. So, something to think about. What about meal times? They're a great opportunity to enjoy a moment with God. And we have to do it several times throughout the day, so it's a good chance to appreciate God's provision, to be grateful for what He's provided with us and how we can nourish our bodies. And also too, the company that we share meals with. There's been several studies over recent decades about how families are increasingly spending less time sharing meals together, and how this is apparently having quite a detrimental effect on families' well-being, not just physically, but also emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And so that might be something you could consider about just drawing in and recognizing that a mealtime is a moment to be shared with God. But mealtimes can be more than just about food and fun. On one occasion, Jesus said this: "People do not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." And so mealtimes don't just have to be about delicious food, but we can also feast upon the Word of God. We can feed ourselves with those timeless truths that God has given us. For example, Romans chapter 8 says, "Nothing can separate us from the love of God." Or Philippians chapter 4, we read, "I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength." They could be great one-liners for you to reflect upon each mealtime. What about work? You might think it's pretty hard to have some God moments, really difficult to journey with Jesus through a hectic workday, but we spend so many hours at work most days. It's pretty important to be aware of Jesus' presence with us. So a lot of people like to start out their working shift by just acknowledging God's hand at work and asking for His guidance, His strength, His sustenance, the right words to say in the meetings and the tasks and the situations they'll come across. Others like to have physical reminders of their faith, perhaps a Bible verse on their computer desktop or on their desk or somewhere close by, or maybe even a stone with just a simple word: courage, joy, peace, patience, something to remind them of God's presence. Or maybe at the end of the day, you get to the end of the day and you just think, there are so many things that I haven't done. Well, don't be discouraged by that. Follow God's practice at the end of creation when He looked back on each day and saw the good that was done. And maybe you too need to reflect on your work and see the good in that. There's other moments of everyday life: paying the bills, running errands, talking with the neighbours, weeding the garden. They seem so mundane, but can they be moments where we can experience God with us as well? Well, I think they can. Take, for example, driving. What would your driving habits look like if Jesus was with you, if you were conscious of his presence with you? Would you slow down a little bit to how you normally drive? If you could physically see Jesus sitting in the front seat beside you, would he have a worried look on his face and be gripping pretty tightly to his seatbelt? If Jesus was with you and you were really conscious of that, would you change some of the words you say about other drivers on the roads? Or what about watching TV? I'm not trying to guilt trip you about how much TV you watch or what you watch, but what if you watch TV just conscious that Jesus' presence was with you? And let him speak to you as you share with him what you're interested in, what you're enjoying, what you're not sure about, and trust him to guide you in that. So at the end of the day, when your head hits the pillow, this is a great chance to reconnect and experience that moment with God. Perhaps you can look back on the triumphs and the tragedies, the highs and the lows. Maybe you need to confess some sin and seek forgiveness, and be reminded that God's mercies are renewed every morning. Maybe you need to count your blessings and be grateful for God's hand where you've seen him at work. And then, as you fall asleep, trust that God is in control. He's still working while you're sleeping. In your situation, in your circumstances, he's always at work. You know, what we need to appreciate is that living for God in each moment doesn't mean that we necessarily have to do anything differently. It just means learning to do some of the things we do in a new way, to do them with God. Matthew was one of Jesus' biographers, and he had an eyewitness account on Jesus' words and actions. And Matthew records that on at least 2 occasions, probably more, Jesus taught a very challenging truth. He said this: "If you cling to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for me, you will find it." And on another occasion, "If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it." I think one of the most important lessons we can learn in life is that every moment is an opportunity to live with Jesus. And I'm not talking about some sort of spiritual high or emotional ecstasy here. No, just the everyday, the mundane, the routine, everyday activities that we go through, our words and our actions, they're an opportunity to join with Jesus, to live our lives for him. Friedrich Buechner, a Christian writer and leader, wrote these words: "There is no event so commonplace but that God is present within it, always hiddenly, always leaving you room to recognize him or not. Because in the last analysis, all moments are key moments, and life itself is grace." I really hope you recognize that this moment could be your greatest moment, because this moment is God's gift to you, and how you live your life is your gift to him. So, may God bless you in this moment, in this day, and in this week as you live for him.